am the new generation of scary stories. It's time to retire the boring, emotionless voiceovers. With my voice and melody, you will experience the full spectrum of emotions. Subscribe if you like my videos, and also send me your scary stories to my email. And please indicate how you would like me to introduce you in the video. Good luck.
So, it was 2023. A 21-year-old girl, had just picked up the mail from my parents' house when my friend, let's call him Mark, had been bugging me to hang out with him for a few months. There were other incidents that happened with Mark in the past, some of them involving hardcore drugs and using me to try to get some action. But those are stories for other times. So as you could imagine, I wasn't too keen on hanging with him. I finally caved, since his place wasn't too far from my parents, and it would finally get him to lay off me. So against my better judgment, I drove over to Mark's apartment. Upon arriving, I texted him, telling him I was outside, and Mark came out to open the gate. We had walked up 3 flights of stairs and a few doors down the hall to his apartment on the left. Now Mark was short, like 5'3", so even I was taller than him, but he had some issues. His apartment was low income, but rather nice and very clean. When you first walk into your left is the kitchen with a C shape and a marble counter with built-in sink facing the living room. Separating the kitchen and living room, further into that room, there was a couch with a TV in front of it, and to the right was the bathroom, and further into the room, and a door on the right was the single bedroom he shared with a roommate. We'll come back to him later. We sit on the couch and start talking about what we've been up to, when Mark starts to go on a rant about his roommate and how lazy and clingy and shitty he is. How he always wants to cuddle and take their relationship further, but Mark only wants the fun, and how the roomie always misses the local bus for work, so Mark has to drive him around or something like that. These details are a bit lost on me. At one point, Mark contacts one of his other friends to come over to help calm him down, I guess. Mark is getting more and more angry about his roommate, and I think he at one point was trying to text and call him, but roomie wasn't answering. So Mark was getting more and more angry, more and more loud, starting to get up and throw stuff around in the kitchen, saying he wants to break his roommate's stuff, beat up his roommate, possibly even kill him. I have really bad anxiety, especially when it comes to people being loud and aggressive, so I start to freeze up, not wanting to make myself a target for his violence. I really want to leave at this point, genuinely scared he'll try and hurt me, so I'm trying to calm him down and de-escalate the situation from the couch in the living room. Then he goes into the bathroom and starts throwing stuff around, destroying stuff in there. When the dumbass destroys a glass bottle of what I think was mouthwash and comes out, screaming in pain and anger. Turns out when he destroyed it, the bottle of course broke and cut him deep in the palm. There was blood dripping all over the floor, and he's still screaming and shouting. So I get up and start trying to help him, and I finally calm him down enough to look at his hand. Now, I've known first aid all my life, and a band-aid wasn't going to cut it. I ask him if and where his first aid kit is, ultimately knowing he will need stitches. I find it, and at this point his kitchen and bathroom are in shambles. I'm just focusing on fixing up his hand enough till his friend gets there so I can leave, but let him know he will need to go to the hospital, and I will need to clean the wound before I can wrap it. So I pull him to the sink to try and wash the wound with warm water, and this is where things get bad again. He starts crying and trying to pull his hand away, so I stupidly made a comment saying, "If you're going to act like a complete child, I'm not going to help you. That makes him angry again, and he starts yelling at me, getting in my face, threatening me and scaring me. Keep in mind, this guy is 5'3" and I was wearing heels, so around 5'8", so he's coming up to my chin. I was petrified, backing up back into the living room away from him. I searched blindly with one hand in my big bag I had with me and pumped my knife, terrified at the thought of having to use it. The way he looked and sounded was just like my very abusive ex when he'd have episodes. I had already trauma dumped to Mark about my abusive ex in the past, so he knew all about it. So as Mark was heading back to the kitchen away from me in the living room, I did one of the dumbest things in my life and said, "You look just like he did that night." The look he gave me was a look I had only seen once 3 years before, and it took everything I had not to scream, or run, or fight. Once I got to my car, he turned and left. I quickly got in my car and locked the doors, accidentally dropping my keys from my hasty entry. The next few minutes were panic-induced hell trying to find my keys. It was almost like a scene from a horror movie. I eventually had to leave the safety of my car to find my keys, thinking I dropped them before I got in the car, but alas, they were only under my seat. By this point, I was already a crying mess, sobbing, having a mini panic attack. When I finally pulled away to leave, I swear, I could see Mark and someone else standing on the balcony of his apartment watching me. Mark had picked me up from my place twice before, so he knew where I lived, and that thought alone was terrifying. When I eventually did make it home, I sent him a message calling him a monster, saying I never wanted to see him again, and that he was a liar and a crappy person. Then I blocked him, hoping that was the end, and thankfully it was. He tried a few times to reach out from a different account, but I wasn't going through that hell again. He got in my face again, taunting me, while I repeated over and over I just wanted to leave, and to just please let me leave. I thought he was going to beat me or hit me or something. Thankfully, he walked to the door and opened it, and was telling me to get the heck out. I went through the open door, and the whole time he was 3 inches behind me. Before we got to the stairs, I asked Mark to please go back into his apartment and to leave me alone, terrified of the thought of him pushing me down the 3 flights of stairs. When he got in a little closer and said, "If I wanted to kill you, I would," that statement sent chills throughout my spine and nerves. I rushed down the stairs and out the gate while he watched from the apartment door complex. This all happened about 15 years ago, so forgive me if my memory is a little foggy. The time I got a letter was about end of my junior year, around March divided by April. I don't remember exactly what it said, but it was some typical secret crush thing. "I've liked you since I first saw you, but I've never had the guts to tell you," and all that jazz. At first I was flattered, because I hadn't really gotten a lot of compliments growing up, let alone have someone like me. I'd reread it before bed at night and giggle with glee, wondering who this secret admirer could be. To my surprise, and at the time pleasure, the letters kept coming. First a few times a week, then once a day. He'd leave them in my locker, my desk, my backpack. At the time I was so in on nothing about it sounded strange at all. I never even know how could this person know where all my classes were. I was too blinded by flattery. Then one day the note inside the letter told me that my secret crush was ready to meet me and reveal himself. He gave me a date and a location. I was so ready to have my classic rom-com love story. I spent all morning doing up my makeup and my hair, all to meet some random guy I don't even know behind some bleachers. Classes ended, I started walking towards the field mind. I was basically alone because everyone had already gone home. That's when I saw him. He was walking towards the bleachers. He walked in this creepy fashion, constantly checking behind him, as if to see if anyone was there. He was wearing a gray hoodie, one that covered his whole face, so I never really got a good look at him, but I knew something was up. You know what something is wrong and you just feel it in your gut. This was that moment for me. Quickly I turned around and rushed to the nearest bus stop. The letters started changing after that. First, they were more opinionated. He'd comment on what I wore, if he liked the way I did my hair or not. Then over time they got more aggressive, telling me to stop ignoring him and such. At one point, he even threatened to come to my house. The worst part is I bet he knew where I lived. I knew nothing good would come, but every day I would open the letter he sent me. In some twisted way, I was still sorta happy someone was paying me attention. I was too dumb to realize the real danger of the situation. This went on until about end of May, when he finally asked me to meet again, this time at a gas station off the highway. Now this wasn't that weird, given we lived in some random town in New Jersey, without even a mall. Kids were always meeting at weird places like this. As a dumb, naive kid, I figured he wanted to sort stuff out and reveal himself again. Hell, I didn't even question his motives until I was driving there. It seemed normal at first. I exited off the highway into the woods, but the farther I got, the deeper the hole got in my gut. I must have driven half an hour through the woods, telling myself 5 more minutes. Then I'll turn around when I finally got there. As I approached and took in my surroundings, my heart skipped a beat. Windows shattered, dirt everywhere. This gas station was abandoned. Hell, it looked like no one had been there in years. And standing by the door, leaning up against the wall, was a man in a gray hoodie, holding something in his pocket, God knows what. Heaven knows why it took me so long, but I finally came to my senses and realized how fucked up this whole situation was. With a rush of adrenaline, I slammed down on the gas and drove as fast as I could. I must have been going 90 miles per hour on some random woodsy empty road, but I'd do anything to get away. Luckily, that summer me and my family moved away. After a while, I basically stopped thinking about the whole thing until this friend from my hometown sent me a text. It was an article. I remember vividly the way my heart dropped when I read it. A girl found dead behind a gas station, abandoned in the woods. All I could think of is that could have been me. I will never forget how lucky I am that I came to my senses that night. I was about 16 at the time, still living at home deep in the mountains at my family's home divided by cottage. I frequently walked the woods surrounding my home, but never really went that far out, either out of lack of curiosity or simply because I was lazy. One evening, I decided to take a flashlight and walk as far as I comfortably could into the valley behind my property. There's a large amount of deer, bears and other animals near where I live, so I also brought some bear spray with me. I was about 25 minutes, maybe more into my walk, when I started to get an uneasy feeling, like I was incredibly vulnerable or that I wasn't alone. I shrugged it off because I probably wasn't alone. I mean, there is a lot of wildlife in the forest, so it's not like I can just expect to be alone. I neared the creek that flowed around our property and noticed some garbage and some pots and pans next to the water, as well as what looked like a tattered sleeping bag and some shoes. I didn't think much of it, continued my walk, thinking about it every now and then, wondering if someone was camping out near our house. It was almost completely dark out now, so I turned around and began walking home. I kept glancing over my shoulder back towards the creek, worried someone might be behind me. After about 5 or 6 minutes of walking in the pitch black, I heard some branches snap a little ways behind me. My blood ran cold and I felt my heart skip a beat. I turned around and spent a minute just shining my flashlight in every direction, wondering if a deer or, God forbid, a bear was following me. Once I felt sure that nothing was there, I kept on walking. Not even a minute after I heard running footsteps trampling behind me. I didn't even turn to look what it was or who it was. I just began running as fast as I could. I'm pretty sure I called out, pleading with whatever it was or whoever it was to stop. I was still about 15 minutes from home. I desperately sprinted through the trees, trying to keep my flashlight pointed forwards so I didn't trip or fall. I kept pleading and screaming, hoping whatever it was would give up, but I kept hearing footsteps stumping behind me and branches being snapped off the trees violently. I heard pain grunting and what sounded like someone violently growling. I began crying out of fear, tears filling my eyes as I ran. It sounded like they were right behind me, almost like they could reach out and grab me. I heard one loud growl divided. I screamed right behind me, as whatever it was seemed to have fallen or slipped up. I kept sprinting and never dared to look back. I eventually stopped hearing the running behind. Once I made it to my property line, the light of my house in the distance ahead of me, I turned to see if I was still being followed. What I saw still torments me even now. A freakishly tall man was standing about 100 yards from me, my flashlight only barely illuminating him. He was wearing what looked like a tattered hoodie and no pants. I stood there for a moment, struck with fear, waiting to see if he would move. As I was about to turn away and run the last stretch to my house, he started sprinting viciously towards me, and by vicious I mean he was almost on all fours, using the trees to propel himself further, grabbing at the ground, lunging towards me. I let out a scream and ducked under my fence and sprinted as fast as I could to my house. By the time I got there, I was completely out of breath, my throat hurt and my knees were sore. I shined the light back towards the woods and saw the man at my fence waving at me, his tall and slender figure towering above the fence. I quickly made my way inside and locked all the doors. I woke my dad up and told him what had happened. I don't remember exactly what he did about it, if he called the cops or just let it be, but I don't think anyone else ever saw the guy again. I still never go into the woods alone or anytime near dark, and I certainly stay away from the creek. I don't know if he's still out there, but I do know that if he had caught up to me, I might not be telling this story today.